Round 3, platforming. How could you even call a platformer if it doesn't have a jump button to send your character up in the air and land on the ground or another platform? It's a basic formula that's in an entire game that makes a platformer. I stated once and I'll state it again. Platforming is my favorite thing in video games, and all I'm looking for in these standing nominees is variety of platform challenge, meaning that I want new and different ways of challenging the player in platforming. It's important for a new platform game to be moving forward with the platform genre and not staying in the middle of the road. So that's what I'm judging here in this round. Let's start with Super Mario 3D Land. Even though the platforming segments are indeed familiar, at least the experience has enough variety of platforming, just like in almost every Mario game. The challenges ranges from your traditional jump from one side to the other, leaping over deadly traps, waiting for platforms to move where you want them, and so on. But most of all, you have a great variety of power-ups to not only enhance the combat against your enemies, but also to use them to gain advantage with very hard platform challenges. We all love using the raccoon suit to have bigger advantage to survive against these platform challenges, which is something that the Galaxy series didn't offer for me. Come to think of it, the 2D and 3D Mario games are separate experiences, where the 2D is linear, but has a lot of variety of power-ups and platforming, but the other has less focus on power-ups and less platforming segments than the 2D series, but much more exploration. But for some odd reason, I started to realize that Super Mario 3D Land is a bridge between both. The reason for that is that this game is part of the Mario handheld series, which is most known for being 2D, but this time is now in a 3D handheld system. Now then, Sonic Generations platforming is what you expect in almost every Sonic game. The series is most known for its speed, but when you're not running, there has to be moments where you have to platform, which is what speed cannot solve. Since this game is just reliving the good old days for the sake of nostalgia, if you experience some of these levels, you know what you're going to get yourself into. Not much more I can say than it's solid like all the other platforming moments in a Sonic game. Next, we have Rayman Origins. This game provided just enough platforming challenges to each and every one of their levels. And as you progress through the game, it gets harder and harder. Many of these levels involves jumping from one platform to another, but what's new to this series is that you can wall jump, and the designers of this game put the wall jumping challenge at its full potential. And some of these platforming challenges are so challenging that it really does test your patience if you don't time yourself perfectly. And a matter of fact, there are just so many platforming segments that requires perfect timing to get passed through. And not to mention that this is probably the most fast-paced Rayman game ever created. When you look at the previous Rayman games, many of them were just slow-paced and just platforming fun. When you're traveling so fast, it requires a lot of quick thinking and reaction when executing these platforms. But since this game has co-op, I was expecting that this game would be pretty unbearable, but for some odd reason, the co-op feature is actually better than Little Big Planet and New Super Mario Bros. Wii, meaning that it's more bearable than expected. It's not like Little Big Planet where if you die, you just have to wait for the living players to reach to another checkpoint in order to return the game, or in New Super Mario Bros. Wii, when you die, your character comes back on the screen with one continue taken away, trapped in a bubble, just waiting for another living character to touch it, just to pop it out and return to the game. Even though both of those games are most memorable for their co-op feature, its flaws is what affects the co-op experience. But for Rayman Origins, it's actually improved over all the other platformers that has a co-op feature, because it made it simple by making the character to inflate themselves when they get hit or damaged, and while inflated, you can move that character anywhere on screen so you can reach to another player to return to the game, and most of all, you're not limited with lives. Just as long as there's one player that's still in play, the game still continues. It made everything bearable. Even when there are moments where one player couldn't keep up with the other, while the other is able to finish the obstacle that is too challenging for the casual player. In fact, I can go far as to say that this is one of the best co-op games ever made. Speaking of one of the best co-op games ever made, Ratchet & Clank 0 for 1 doesn't disappoint with its very intense platforming moments. Of course, there are a lot of moments where you have to jump higher and higher to reach to the top, but there are plenty of teamwork moments, such as using a vacuum-like gadget to suck your partners in and shoot them out to the other side when trying to get to the other side of a very long distance platform. And there are nerve-wracking moments where you have to use the hook shot to get past through, which causes the intensity to go very high. The fun part is that players can hook shot each other, and all the players have to do is swing together to the next part where they have to hook shot till each of them reach to the ground. It's always fun as hell to see your friends to fall off and don't make it. But whenever a player dies, when you stand on the ground and wait for a couple of seconds, they will return to the game, which makes it very suitable to play with your friends, both online and local. But everything else is what you expect from a Ratchet & Clank series. Jumping over traps, get to another platform, hookshot your way to long distances, and so on. But other than that, I can't say that the platforming in this game was as inventive as A Crack in Time. Trine 2's platforming segments may not be as intense as the rest of the games in this competition, but the platforming segments here requires a lot of thinking, trial and error, and quick thinking and reaction whenever you encounter any puzzles or platforms. Since you have 3 of these characters with different abilities to use for various advantages, like for example the knight being able to swift against his enemies faster than all the other characters, the archer who can use her rope and swing across, and the wizard to summon boxes of any shape and size to create a platform to reach higher areas. So in a way, the platforming segments is almost simultaneously puzzle solving. But who am I kidding? That's the reason why this game is a puzzle platformer. As much as I despise the original, the sequel, Alice Madness Returns, made its platforming segments so much better and at times hard as hell. Of course you can only platform when you're in Wonderland, but when Alice gets to the real world, she has none of these abilities, so all you have to do is just walk through the path and talk to various characters. What I find so fun about this game's platforming segments is that the platforms here are very far apart. This would have been considered a broken game if they only have double jump. But instead, this game not only gives you triple jump, but also quadruple jump and the ability to glide. To even make it more intense, you have invisible platforms that can only be seen when you shrink. But at this size, you cannot jump, so once you get the layouts, you just have to memorize what you've seen from the invisible platforms in order to overcome these obstacles. And you gotta remember that there are so many of these invisible platforms in this game. You might think it's a bit too hard, but unlike the original Alice, Madness Returns made its checkpoints bearable. Where you fail and fall into a bottomless pit, Alice turns to a butterfly and turns back to normal to where you last stood. This fixed everything over the original, but the only annoyance I have with Alice the Madness Returns is that there are a lot of segments where you have a button that can activate a platform to appear. So whenever you get off the button, the platform descends, indicating that the player needs something that weighs as much as Alice to overcome this obstacle. So you have no other choice but to use these time bombs to weigh in the button and summon these platforms before the bomb self-destructs and the platform descends from reaching your goal. I don't mind it if it's few and far between, but with these button pressing moments, it seems like you encounter it for every 10 or 20 minutes, which causes the issue of repetitiveness. But not at the point where it's game-breaking irritating, because the game has some of the fairest checkpoints that I've ever seen in a game. If I have to give my hats off to one game that has the best variety of platforming challenge, I have to give it to Outland. Remember when I said that this game took the color switching at its full potential? Well, there are just enough moments where you have to switch red to blue and vice versa to survive these red and blue deadly objects that can easily hurt you if you're in the wrong color. And it's really cool that these traps gets in the way with your platform so that when you're jumping up in the air, you can switch to the right color, which requires a lot of perfect timing. There are so many platforms and objects that are either red or blue, and for the objects that are not deadly, there are platforms and objects that are either the color red or blue, where if you're not in the exact color, that object or platform will either disappear or not be activated. There are so many platforming segments where you can only reach to another platform when switching to that color, otherwise you'll fail and have to try all over again. I call this pure genius for putting such usage of color in a video game and just rocked right with it. And now for the loser of this round. It's a tie between Little Big Planet 2 and Kirby's Return to Dreamland because both of them have little to no changes with the platforming segments, but I can't eliminate them both. It's against the rules. And now, I'm judging both of these games for its platforming segments, and I have to say that there are barely any changes from their originals. I'm not talking about those customized levels made by Little Big Planet 2's online community, because there are some that are actually better than what was offered in the hard copy of the game. I am only talking about the adventure in the hard copy. There were just so many moments where it's just too familiar from the original, and yet it wasn't even as challenging as the original. All you're doing in Little Big Planet 2 is jump from platform to platform with very little height of jump, holding objects from falling, and jumping high on bouncing platforms. Does that sound any different from the original? And for Kirby's Return to Dreamland, it cheats the platforming challenge since you have the ability to briefly fly up in the air. The creators put hardly any challenge when you're up in the air, which makes its platforming challenge to feel almost non-existent since you have such an ability. So to finally make a judgment between those two games, I have to say Kirby's Return to Dreamland. In comparison to last year's game, Kirby's Epic Yarn, despite the game being way too easy for not being able to die, at least the platforming segments had some challenge. And this game shares the same flaw like almost every other Kirby game from the series, which is barely any platforming challenge. So the loser of this round, Kirby's Return to Dreamland. Round 4, Innovation. The definition of innovation: new or something introduced. You know, innovation is really hard to do when you're trying to make a whole new experience, but at the same time, developers are trying their best not to dissatisfy the fans for not making their games too different with its established continuity, or pretending that they're innovative, and the end result is that they're just gimmicky. So in this round, I am looking for something that is new on the table for platformers, and if it's an old series, I'm judging at what did they do differently than any other game in their series. The beginning of this round, I will have to start with Ratchet & Clank 0 for 1. This is very different than what we're used to in the series. Let me attempt to explain. Since this game has a co-op feature and is trying to make sure that teamwork is mandatory, it becomes rewarding to have more players to join with you each time you and everyone else together solve puzzles and pass through an obstacle together. A lot of people complain that they have fixed cameras, but considering that this doesn't have split screen and focus on teamwork more than anything else, the fixed camera is actually a good thing. I don't like split screen when you're playing with co-op, and I don't want to be too far away from my partners either. You have moments when working together, such as using vacuum-like gadgets to suck your partners in and shoot them to the other side when trying to get to the other side of long-distance platforms. And most of all, since these bosses and mini-bosses are ridiculously hard to beat, it definitely requires more players to join in your gameplay, but since all players have weapons, you can use them to cause a massive attack with anyone who stands in your way. And do I have to mention it? The hookshot moments where you can hook your partners at any time and have to swing across the other side? Someone is bound to fail at any time with these moments here. But for a Ratchet & Clank experience, just a single player experience alone just feels watered down. But I will get to that later in this competition. Missplosion Man is everything that was great from the original Splosion Man and made it bigger and much more challenging. The craziness of throwing your character to incoming explosives just to get higher was just wickedness fun. You can attack scientists who created you and actually cause much more destruction than before. There's a new Super Mario style map level that made it much more easier to select levels, and the co-op feature is actually different than the single player experience. Overall, there isn't really anything totally new to the series, but I have to say that there were a bunch of pop culture references that occasionally made me laugh. Another game that isn't anything new on the table, but has some in a way, is Sonic Generations. Well, the only thing I can say that is new on the table is that they've remade all the memorable levels, remixed many of the tracks, and made an ingenious idea of celebrating Sonic's 20th anniversary by making old Sonic and new Sonic to have a crossover. Despite the fact that it feels totally different to play as either new or old Sonic in these remade levels, isn't really a big change for the franchise, but at least compared to the loser of this round, it had new ideas. Alice Madness Returns. Do I have to say it? It basically improved on everything over the original. The targeting system, the better combat and action sequences, better checkpoints, better platforming, more creativity, and so much more. Well, it sounds like I'm praising this game to be fixed than innovative, so let's dive in further. I like the fact that this game goes even further in the world of Wonderland than any incarnation of Alice in Wonderland because it explores underwater cities, baby doll toy worlds, and even a Japan version of Wonderland, and each and every one of those worlds gives Alice her own dress to fit the theme of each level and a bunch of different enemy variety to go along with it. It reminds me a lot of the Gex series. Whenever he's in a different world, he changes his outfit to fit the theme. Even though the new targeting system is reminiscent to Legend of Zelda, it made it so much better than the damn third-person shooting controls that were unbearable to play through for me. And do I also have to mention that the ability to swift when you're transformed to a butterfly is actually really cool in its own way? And yet, I still don't understand at all why this game has been overlooked to the public while it defies all stereotypes of platformers to be quote-unquote cutesy and friendly. Outland took the creativity of switching colors and puts it at its maximum range of potential, from switching from red to blue and vice versa to survive against red and blue spores and beams that can easily hurt you if you were in the wrong color, activating switches, and even displaying a whole new platform challenge made this game looks and feels so original. The theme of South American and ancient Asian myths in a Metroidvania was never done like this before. I sound like a broken record for repeating myself, but can you possibly name another platformer that is at all like this? I can't really say that any other game had this idea, and I adore this game for putting such inventive ideas and effortlessly executed it extremely well. Well, I might as well discuss about the innovation that this game did for the Metroidvania subgenre. Well, the most frustrating part about almost every Metroidvania game, except for Metroid Fusion, is that you don't know where to go, and you have to wander around aimlessly to find an area that you can travel or find an item or power-up to help you on a couple of areas. It's one of those aspects that made me not like the subgenre as much as I wanted to. However, Outland fixed this issue of getting lost by finding a bunch of shiny butterflies where if you touch them, they'll fly into the direction where you have to go. This easily made the experience less frustrating at a great degree. Now on Rayman Origins. I'm gonna make this quick and be honest here. It did look like the original Rayman. However, when you play it, it didn't feel like any other Rayman game because the gameplay is much more fast-paced, the co-op feature is superb, and the challenge offered here keeps getting harder and harder as you continue the game. And now on Shrine 2. You got yourself an epic fantasy adventure right in the 2.5D platformer. You got the warrior, the archer, the wizard.
Oh, sorry, I put in the wrong footage.
What are you talking about? You got the right footage. This is Shrine 2.
Actually, this is Shrine 1.
What? No, it can't be the same game. I can't tell the difference. They both have to be Shrine 2.
Actually, this is Shrine 1. Here's the footage of Shrine 2.
You're shitting me. You mean to tell me that Shrine 2 is the exact same game as Shrine 1?
This is Shrine 1, and this is Shrine 2. Yep, Shrine 2 is more of an overpriced DLC from the first.
Okay, this is sure as hell not the first platformer sequel to be the exact same game as the first, so let's look at the other standing nominees. Here's Super Mario 3D Land.
Oh wow, the raccoon suit has returned. Oh, look at the new level designs. Is this a 3DS game? Wow, look at the 3D effects. I never seen Mario in 3D.
Okay, so it is different than all the other Mario games, but look at Little Big Planet 2.
It looks like the same. Holy crap, look at the mini games. Never played pool at the first. Wow, you can actually play this game on the PS Move. Finally, I can use this waste of junk for something. And oh my god, you can actually bring old customized levels from the original game and bring it to Little Big Planet 2. Oh man, with the new items with Little Big Planet 2, you can make your own levels even better than before.
Hey, I'm the one running the show here.
So what are you going to do to Shrine 2? There's nothing new about this game here. It's just the same characters, same abilities, etc. Nothing else new. Been 3 years since the first was released, and this is all they have to offer as a sequel?
You have a point. Round 5. Collectibles. Other than platforming, collecting stuff is also my favorite thing in gaming. It's an element that encourages movement in getting the things that you need to advance your adventure or give players a bigger challenge of getting a 100% completion when doing so. Whatever the purpose of collecting these collectibles, it needs to feel rewarding and retrieving any of them to fulfill the experience. So let's take a look at these collectibles from the standing nominees. Let's start with Sonic Generations. This game's collectibles is the same as all the other Sonic games, collecting rings. You know what they're used for. They're used to act as lives, where if you collect a bunch of them to protect you once you get hit. And when you get hit, those rings scatter. But the rewarding thing about collecting those rings is that when you reach 100 rings, you gain an extra life. New collectibles to the series are these boss keys, which can be attained by accomplishing 3 challenges the level has offered. And they are the only way to gain you access to the boss, but once defeating the boss, you gained access to new levels to further your adventure. And another collectible are once again Chaos Emeralds, where classic Sonic gets the yellow, green, and red emeralds, and modern Sonic gets the blue, gray, and purple emeralds. And they can be found in separate levels, which I'm not going to tell. And what purpose do they serve? Well, collect them all and see for yourself. Ratchet & Clank All for One. It is expected to have those rewarding bolts to use them to buy weapons from the vendors. However, I'm pretty impressed that Insomniac made those bolts quite balanced to collect when in co-op. It's not like when there's a bolt, the player who touches it first obtains it, but instead the player who causes the damage to make those bolts to appear belong only to the player who destroyed that object, whether if it's a crate, an enemy, or anything else that's destructible. To know that a certain bolt belongs to a player, the bolts glow in a certain color, and that glowing color can only be collected by the player that has the matching color. That way, it would be fair for the player to earn those bolts for actually doing something rather than having people to steal those bolts when they don't do anything. Also, there are certain parts of each level where you can find giant bolts to also be part of your collectible. These giant ones are glowing to the specific color for the player with the same color. But luckily, when you find these giant bolts, there's at least one for each player to make everything fair. And finally, a new collectible to the series are these innocent creatures, and to be able to collect one of them, all you need is to use a vacuum and suck them in. So what is the purpose of all these collecting? Each time when you reach to a certain checkpoint or finish a level, a scoreboard will come out and grade each player on how well they did, such as the most number of bolts collected, the most enemies killed, the most collected animals, the most teamwork, and etc. It's always fun to see who is the winner of each part of the game and who is really the loser. This is the best way they can do in terms of collectibles, since this is a co-op game, even though it brings a lot of nostalgia of this arcade-like gameplay. And now to Outland's collectibles. The one thing that you all should keep in mind are these coins, and they are very important because you can use them to exchange for new upgrades. You can find them by killing enemies or destroying vases and other destroyable objects. There are only two things that you can upgrade with the certain amount of coins collected: your hit points and the energy bars. Upgrading them isn't mandatory, but it is wise to get them whenever you get the chance, because as you progress in the game, the difficulty uprises, so you need all you can get to survive against these obstacles, such as larger amount of hit points and a new energy bar to use for powerful beams against deadly foes. To make this exchange, you need to find a statue that's holding an object, and each time you encounter one of them, they ask you a total amount of coins, and once you have the right amount of coins, you can buy that upgrade to improve your character, rather than searching and finding an upgrade like other Metroidvania games. And the last collectible that you should all know is the Mask of the Gods, which unlocks extras such as concept arts or enhanced in-game abilities. Since Rayman Origins went right back to the formula of the original Rayman game, your object of the game is to free Electoons who are caged up. And for that, your reward is to get an Electoon coin, which grants you new levels, bonus levels, and tons of extras. You can find one in the end of each level, but there are even more of them to save, such as finding more of them in secret areas, replaying the whole level, but changing it to time trial mode, and get a certain amount of collected lums from 200, 300, and above. The lums, for those who don't know, are these fairy-like collectibles that act like coins. Of course, just collecting each of them is equivalent to one lum, but when a character collects a king lum, the lum starts singing, which makes it temporarily doubles the smaller lum's value up till the lum stops singing. And another collectible that you should keep in mind are these skull coins. There are so many skull coins placed in hidden or dangerous areas that are worth 25 lums. Like I said, collecting the right amount of lums by the time you reach to the end of the level give you more Electoons. Electoons are important because they give you extras, such as additional costumes back at the snoring tree. I love this variety of costumes because when you play co-op, nobody's fighting about who wants to be who. There can actually be 2 glow boxes, 2 Raymans, and more, just with different colors, while other co-op games out there like All for One, you can't change characters once they're selected. For Alice Madness Returns, I'm going to keep it short. You collect teeth throughout the game, and they can be used to upgrade either your hobby horse, your blade, your pepper grinder, or the teapot cannon within the press of a pause button. There you can take a look at your weapons, and the game asks you to collect a certain amount of teeth in exchange for either one of the weapons upgrade. And believe me, you need it in order to survive these fearsome enemies that gets harder and harder to beat. And the last thing she collects are memories, which are these shiny like things that are straight out of her imagination, which are part of the quest to recall forgotten memories from her past. I don't know what purpose does this collectible serve, but to see a bit of her memory from her childhood just adds that darkness feel to the game, despite some of them didn't make any sense. Super Mario 3D Land's collectibles, long story short, it's just like all the other Mario games. Coins that can be found anywhere, and you can get a certain number of points to gain an extra life. But I count this as collectibles, the power-ups, because every time you see one of these things, you immediately want to obtain it just so you can have those powers and abilities. And to make this short as well, Little Big Planet 2's collectibles are these bubble-like orbs that can be used for breaking high scores at the end of each level, and to see who in your co-op play has the most collectibles. But the best thing about the Little Big Planet games is that collecting orbs are actually more rewarding than probably all the games in this list, because there are a certain number of big orbs that has an object in it, and once you collect it and finish the level, you own that object, which either is a costume add-on or a new object in your inventory for level customization, such as a random object, decoration, a sticker, and the rest. And so, here's the loser of this round, because of its most unrewarding collectible in the whole list, and that is Missplosion Man. And here is your collectible. Shoes. Just shoes. You know, you have so many great opportunities to make the player to collect a lot of stuff for a platformer like this in order to make the gameplay a lot more fun than it already is. But who in their right mind think that collecting shoes is at all exciting?
Girls, that's who.
Didn't I just kick you out? I'm not going to let you interrupt me again. Get out of here. And let me finish this round. You know, just like the original Splosion Man, this game could have had a lot of great opportunities to make a lot of collectibles and enhance the gameplay. But just shoes? You gotta be kidding me. So the one eliminated for its uninspiring collectibles, Missplosion Man.
Oh boy, you're going to be in so much trouble when you hear this.
What?
I called your girlfriend about what you're going to do to her favorite game of 2011.
You did what?
Uh-oh, here she comes now.
What the fuck are you doing, you fucking piece of shit?
Oh hey, baby. What you just heard isn't true. I didn't eliminate Missplosion Man out of the competition.
Yeah, not only he eliminated that game out of the competition, he shot it to death.
What the fuck?
Oh, you backstabbing son of a... Baby, don't let the video game come between us. Don't I mean more to you than just a...
Watch out, she's got a gun!
I'm stuck! I am never doing this again! Fuck you guys! I am fucking done with this shit!
Dude, are you still alive?
I'm fine. What about you?
Yeah, I'm alright. Good thing she was a horrible shot. If I told her that Twilight sucked, I would have been dead by now.